Today, I'm here. Last year I was here, and we were here for the second Dutch Day. Not the double Dutch Day, the second Dutch Day. The year before was the first. As I understand it, today we are here, and it is actually Europe Day. So I like the title. We're not thinking small here in this Theosophical Society. But as always, it's very good to be here. For me, probably you're aware, those of you who follow through any of these video blogs that I might be doing, that there is a certain amount of movement in terms of travel that has come with this particular position. It's a very good thing in that it has enabled me to really connect with our members and our groups, our sections around the world. Obviously, at this early stage, I have not been to nearly all of the groups that we have, and probably I will never do all of the groups. We have groups in 70 countries in the world. So, but it's been something that has been quite, it's revealing, it's inspiring, it's many things. The work that we are attempting to do in this world, in spite of all odds. So today I was asked to talk a little bit about the TS, the Theosophical Society. And the request was to talk about the present and the future. And probably I'm going to begin by taking a little bit of the easy way out, in beginning by talking about the past. I mean, everybody can talk about the past because it's already happened. It can be described with some ease. But I think it's important for us, particularly today. And we began with this ceremony where we are unveiling this bust, which will continue from this point forward to actually be not just a bust, but a presence here at the International Theosophical Center. But this presence and this continual reminder of the influence of HPB. None of us are here today gathered together in the absence of that influence. And so to just touch base with it from time to time, I think is a very good thing. I mean, our society had its beginnings through the influences of those great ones to which HPB was responsive in ways that we normally tend not to be. So it had that beginning in New York City, which is something that's often forgotten. The Theosophical Society had its roots and its foundation in this very young country that had yet to make its impression upon the world, but that for some reason was chosen to be the place where this society started. HPB, when she came there, she had, of course, her instructions and her sense of her reason for coming. But one of the things that she said was that she was so excited about coming to New York. She described it as, she felt as if she was a Muslim coming to Mecca. And the reason for that was not because of some religious connotations of the United States, but because of this movement that had become so active at that time in 1875 in the United States. And the movement was this incredible sort of, it's something that would seem strange to us today. The attention and the newspaper attention and the media attention to this movement of spiritualism. To us today, there are a few spiritualistic churches that still survive. You know, we hear about mediums doing whatever it is that mediums do. But for her, and in that particular time, It was something that was the subject of front-page newspaper articles all around the United States. I mean, of course, that's how she connected with Colonel Olcott. This phenomenal movement that suddenly sprang up out of nowhere, where there was this supposed communication with people who had passed on to the other side. And it's something that you would think would be easily dismissed. And for the normal mind, we tend to dismiss things. The problem with this particular movement at that time was that it could not be dismissed. All of these various phenomena, where there were levitations, things materializing in the room, sounds coming from all directions, that was what drew Olcott there. Because Olcott, above and beyond everything else, he was an investigator. And when he went to the Eddy Farm, which is where HPB and he met, he was there with one thing in mind. He was going to examine this. He was going to put it through all the sorts of scientific methods he could. He was going to observe, and he was going to find something that was off-key, if it was there. He didn't find it. Ended up writing repeated articles for the newspaper. And so HPB described how when she first came to the U.S., she wanted to get a copy of the day's paper, one of the articles I believe that Olcott had written about the phenomenon, and she ended up having to pay, I think it was $5 for a daily newspaper, because they had just sold out. And we're talking $5 in 1875. So that's a good meal for 10 of us, probably, at a good restaurant. So this was the setting. And so, of course, her role was to utilize this already present movement as a vehicle to bring deeper teachings, a way of speaking to this thing that had captured the public imagination. She was going to deepen it through providing these teachings that only this ageless wisdom of Theosophy could give to it. And so we had our roots, in a sense, in a sort of a psychic upwelling that had taken place. And the society was something that when it started, it thrived initially. And the interest around HPB and was enormous. She was in the newspaper quite a bit as well. And so when the society started, there was great hope. Olcott and she were people who were just plotting the future course. And then, of course, the interest died. At the time, 3 years after the founding of the Theosophical Society, HPB and Olcott were boarding a ship headed for Bombay, India. And along the way, they had groups of people that had come together, and they were saying that this movement is wonderful, this organization is wonderful, we support it. But one thing, this is a spiritual organization. There should be no dues. People should not be asked to pay to join this organization, because clearly this is something that will be provided for from spiritual sources. And this is what Olcott described. He said, oh yeah, that's right, good idea. And of course what he found in very short order was that nobody was paying anything. The organization was going broke, and he was having to dig into his own pocket to support this movement. So by the time that they got on the boat to go to India to meet with the group that they thought would be their sister group there, Olcott writes in his diary, old diary leaves, that as they were leaving, they had their things packed and they were going out, and he said there was a chandelier there in the room. And he said he really felt like he wanted to take the chandelier with them, because there had been so many meetings they had had where they could not reach a quorum, and they would have to depute the chandelier as another member, a light bearer, for the meetings. This was the rise and then the sort of subsiding in the United States. Until they found themselves in India, where, in many ways, just as this spiritualistic movement became something of a fuel for the expression of these theosophical teachings, in India, a similar fuel was the resistance of the church. It was colonial India. And so the church's attempt to diminish and to deny the validity of ancient religions became a subject for HPB to try to rectify, to correct, and to bring about an understanding of a deeper nature of the religions that were being tossed to the side by these Western colonizers, essentially. So in India is where this movement that we are a part of thrived. From that point, it's something that took on life, found its roots, and from there spread abroad. So in many ways we think of our initial thought tends to be of the TS as something that is rooted from its very beginning in India, but it was the place that it had to go to at that time in order to have full appreciation. So this is kind of the way that our organization has developed and came into being. This is our past. Out of that, many, many people were touched. Many great people became involved with this movement. And then it passed on. So, in many ways, the wisdom aspect of what we value so much in Theosophy is the direct contribution of HPB and of those inner founders that really were able to work through this remarkable woman. The form aspect, now this is Theosophy there. But then we're not members of Theosophy. All of us are members of the Theosophical Society, which is a very specific organization, a very specific form that came into being to support the spread of these life-enhancing doctrines, these life-enhancing teachings. And that's something that is largely credited to the work of Colonel Alcott. He was the old, hard-headed, ever so practical American can-do type of guy. He saw a problem, it was something that needed to be fixed. And this is the way he just approached everything. And so the structure that he developed, or that developed over time, is the one that we have now. Which is really, it's kind of remarkable when you think about it, that in almost every respect, the national sections of this one Theosophical Society with its headquarters in Adyar in India is a group of essentially autonomous organizations. And so the Netherlands, as long as we ascribe to the fundamental the three objects and behave accordingly, then what is done in the Netherlands is an expression of the way that the teaching as it needs to be expressed for these people. Belgium, Latin America, everywhere it's like that. Which really you would think would be a prescription for failure. That every single body has the freedom and autonomy to direct itself by its own highest lights. I mean, it's almost one of those ideas that sounds like we don't need dews because it will rain, manna will come from heaven. But for whatever reason, this experiment of 141 years now is something that is working. So that's the form that was created. But any form requires something more. Something has to come into it. Something has to give life to that form. And so in many ways, HPB did her work, Olcott did his work, and then there came a point where the torch was passed. And the person to whom that torch was passed is the one who really, I mean, if we really look at it, it is Annie Besant who really set the tone, the course, the various structures for the Theosophical Society worldwide. She was this absolutely remarkable, almost a force of nature. She was remarkable. I mean, in terms of, we're here in Naarden. How did Naarden come to be something that is operating within the Theosophical spectrum? Well, this lady, Annie Besant, there was someone who heard about her and her work, had donated this property for her to determine its uses. And so we have this ongoing center at Naarden. And the same is true in every single area of the world. You have Naarden, you have the Manor House in Australia, in the United States you have Crotona, you have the national headquarters for the Theosophical Society in America. In India, we don't even need to go into it. She gave away more property than we have within the Theosophical Society now. The equivalent of the YMCA, the Young Men's Indian Association. She donated their headquarters. Beautiful building. I was there 2 years ago. Lily and I went there for their, I guess it was their 100th anniversary to celebrate it. Beautiful building right in the heart of town. And similar things just all over the world. She was a woman who all she had to do was to think of the project, to turn her mind in that direction, and it came to life. And it always came to life in these stunning ways. The Theosophical Society today, when we think of it, there are subsidiary expressions of this theosophy. We have the co-Masonic movement, you have the ES, which was founded by HPB, but then the impress that has passed on today comes from Besant. All of these subsidiary ways in which we approach this spirituality came through her. The strength of her personality was such that almost every, now we can call them sister or brother theosophical organization, which at the time that they became sisters and brothers, it was because of what was called schisms, where they split because of the strength. It was almost always in reaction to the strength of Annie Besant's influence, her personality, and the way in which she guided the Theosophical Society. The fact that there was a Krishnamurti who was able to make his appearance and to put his imprint on the contemporary world is directly due to her. The fact that this elevation to the point where he could make this imprint caused a huge division within the Theosophical Society was because of her particular vision of how this was to occur. The very last letter that is known to have been received from the Mahatmas came to Annie Besant. It was one that was, for a long time, a severely edited letter, in the sense that it was a letter that said certain things, but also said things that were critical. The letter from the Mahatma said certain things that were critical of the direction and the view that Annie Besant was pursuing so strongly. I mean, her strength of character and her force of will was such that it was unstoppable. And the whole thing about this cant of the masters must be stopped. This constant glamorized discussion of the Mahatmas that so pervaded our Theosophical society at some point was what was, from the Mahatma's point of view, was what had to come to a stop. Stop talking about us in such confused and erroneous ways, because it only distracts from the work that we're to do. But this is something that was also an inheritance. She was a woman. Now, I can't even imagine what would happen if either as president in the United States or as president of the Adyar Society, if I were to say something like this. But her practice was this. In terms of the Theosophical Society's treasury, at year end, her requirement was that there not be one penny remaining in that treasury. That everything that has come must be spent in this work, because surely it will come again. Yeah, tell that to your board of directors. Yeah, I know how long you'll be in office. But, that being said, that was the practice. Through this intense awareness that it is only through our capacity to be empty that we can be filled. It's a wonderful idea, but when you try to apply it, it's something that can meet with some reserve at the minimum and resistance at the most. But it is, in fact, one of those principles that underlie what we could call an effective spiritual life. So these are the great people that have passed something on to us. And so we find ourselves now the beneficiaries. So many things that we call the Theosophical Society today are the benefits that have passed down to us from people who made enormous sacrifices. I mean, sacrifices that we study about and try to imagine, but probably it's very difficult for us to imagine the level of commitment, the level of sacrifice, and the level of flow and that they were able to engender because of this way of living. So now we find ourselves in this position. For the Theosophical Society, and for the work that we're trying to do within it, there is no question we are blessed with really enormous resources. Perhaps we don't see it that way all the time, but just if it were only this, what we have here at the ITC, this is a remarkable expression of the nature of the work that we're doing. But there's more than that. I mean, we have, in the United States, one of the more difficult decisions that I had to make was that we had had a publishing operation going for 49 years, where we had, 49 years ago, it had been determined that one of the things that is necessary is we need to get this theosophical literature. It needs to be something that can be presented to the public in a format that is accessible for public reading, that will be available in the bookstores and the places that the public go to. So we started this line of publications called Quest Books. Very good books. And so we went on doing that. And as is the nature of things, it was something that was successful. people were, in fact, looking to come into contact with varieties of expressing this ageless wisdom in a popular voice. And so it's something that became quite good, until a point came where the book industry in general took notice and recognized that here, in fact, is a market. The marketing mind. There is a market that has been overlooked. And there's gold in them thar hills, is the way they say it in the U.S. There's money to be made in those places. And as a result, what you have, any book distributor of any merit has what they call now a body, mind, spirit division. And so all of these authors who previously might have been coming to really the only one who could hear and could understand their voice, then started to migrate to these others, because obviously what they were getting paid was a lot more. So anyway, the result of this was, of course, that for our Theosophical publications, it was something that became a service that we did, but a service that impacted us in that it was not profitable. In fact, it was extremely unprofitable. So it fell to me, having been passed from others before me, it wasn't the first time it became unprofitable, but the decision had to be made in light of the conditions of the world in which we are operating now. Do our current activities, are they necessary to serve this need? And the decision that was clear to me is no, they're not. The types of books we were publishing were being published by others. The authors we would publish at this time, they can find voice through other places. So in that sense, our work in that arena was done. Now you hate to do that on the verge of your 50th anniversary. But, one more year of repeated losses just wasn't permissible. So anyway, what ends up happening is this. As a result of having 50 years of these publications, basically we said we are no longer going to have 12 new books a year. We're stopping that. But what we found is this, that there is so much demand for those past 50 years that by stopping doing what we were doing, now the attention has focused on what we've already done. And so now it's become profitable. By going out of business, it became profitable. But all of this is to say that there are certain resources we have inherited, but that sometimes we're unaccustomed, we're so used to seeing it in one way that it becomes difficult to look at it from another direction. In this case, we looked at it from another direction. And it surprised us. In Adyar, every year we had been, when the convention time comes, 1,000, 1,200 of our members gather. Predominantly from India, but there are many people who come from around the world. Every year we would meet outside at the Adyar Theater. And every year, about a week before the convention started, we would put up a covering above it. Thatched roof at one point, until the fire department said that, if somebody likes a match, that thatch will go up and everybody with it. So we decided we would put up a covering for our convention. So we did that. Probably many of you are aware that it came down, but it's going back up again. But we put up this new roof. And so it was for our convention. But what we found is this, that there are a number of allied groups, people who look to the Theosophical Society as something of some importance, who would like to associate in some way. And so they would like to use our place from time to time for their gatherings. So part of having this beautiful new structure was that we found many other groups started to come and to align themselves with the Theosophical Society. Anytime we did one of those events, always there would be people from these groups who would join the Theosophical Society. The Anthroposophical Society came and has used our place on occasions now. We had a group of, very interesting group actually. It's a group that focuses on meditation for the enhancement of various things in life. But this particular group focused on the chief executive officers of corporations to utilize meditation in order to develop better business practices and better sorts of environments in their workplaces. They came to us, and this roof was so attractive. So their programs were held there, and their people came to become associated with the Theosophical Society as well. So again, this is just a description of some of the resources that have been developed over time. And the issue for all of us is not, that we lack, but really how it is that we can utilize them. And the utilization has some very specific qualifications, I think. If we start to think in terms of what is the purpose of our work, why is it that we have a Theosophical Society, and what is it that we are here to do? Generally, because we tend to be in groups, it's very easy for us to get comfortable with each other. We like each other, generally. I don't know if I like him so much, but we like each other generally. And so it can get to be very comfortable speaking to one another, trying to develop some of these inner qualities together. And it's something that can become comfortable to the point that it's possible to screen out some of the things that are going on around us. One of the things that occurred to me very early on, whenever you come into some position such as this, where you're the nominal head of an organization that has very high ideals, very often you start to be asked about the vision for the Theosophical Society. What is your vision? How is it that you're going to revamp this thing? What is it that is the new way of looking at it for our time? And I find myself being a very disappointing sort of fellow with those questions. In the sense that the purpose of this Theosophical Society, I don't think that I can state better than it has already been stated. What has been regarded widely by many as the most prominent of the letters received from the Mahatmas is a letter that actually was never fully received from the Mahatmas, the Mahachohan's letter. But in that, some very strong and some very specific things are said. But one of them is that the work that we are here to do is that our doctrines must have a practical reaction upon the moral code. So the idea that every one of us functions out of a set of values. Every person in this world, there are certain values, and there are certain shared common values that might even be completely wrong. That the work of the Theosophical Society is to bring this theosophy to have an impact on this code that guides the behavior of humanity. We're in an age right now where never before really has it been, probably it has been true, but never before has it ever been something that is so completely apparent that humanity, I would say for better or for worse, but really humanity for worse, has become a force of nature. In the sense that the very climate that affects every single being on this planet has been affected and is continuing to be affected by our collective behaviors, which are supported by a collective moral code that permits us to behave in the ways that we do and that we have. And obviously there are, I won't say consequences, but there are certainly issues that arise from that. So, the list is long, but I don't think it's something that we're unaware of. Everywhere we look, water, there are wars being fought about water. Arable land is disappearing. They have these crazy figures about how many, square kilometers of land per day are disappearing. Just figures that are astounding. And then one of the other things that really has occurred to me, and it's one of the places that I think our work in the future is really going to have to find some sort of roots. It's interesting to me because it's not something that appears in any of our teachings. There's no intimation of this trend that has engulfed us since the time of the founding of the Theosophical Society. I have to believe that it's something that was seen and anticipated because of the way the value and the extent of the Theosophical teachings. But, this thing that has occurred and that is advancing rapidly and that's affecting everything, first really became prominent in 2008. You may have heard me talk about this. Because it's only in 2008 that for the very first time, human population became predominantly centered in urban centers. To us that seems, that's passé. In Europe, in America, we have been urbanized for quite some time. But it's one of these things that has consequences. In the sense that we're not just talking about centers of population. We're talking about centers that produce and impact consciousness. So all of us, the majority of us find ourselves living in the New Yorks, the Londons, the Amsterdams, the Romes, the Madrases of the world. And I always find myself coming back to this Annie Besant when she was traveling all over the world. She was coming to Chicago at one point, and she found herself on the train coming to Chicago. And she said, the way she described it, she had just dozed off and was just getting a little nap, when suddenly she was awakened because she felt this enormous sense of dread, fear, that just engulfed her. And she checked herself and what's going on? And there was nothing in her mind. But obviously she was a sensitive person, as we all are. But then she realized, at the time that she was coming to Chicago, the city of Chicago, the main industry that it was known for, it was called the hog butcher for the world. Cattle, pigs, sheep, slaughterhouse industry was what was one of the predominant industries in that city. And she said that what she felt was this enormous fear, this cloud of dread that was hanging over the city and even extending out as she approached it on the train. So, the slaughterhouses are gone from Chicago. But the idea that the consciousness that becomes concentrated in these areas spreads and affects any and all. And so it becomes really one of those things that is an important place for us to find a work. Because obviously, if in fact we find that the Theosophical teachings, and honestly for me, one of the things that has becomes apparent, just like the conditions of urban population change, other things change as well. I mean, for instance, when the Theosophical Society was founded, one of the great needs was to develop some sort of vocabulary to discuss the nature of these inner world, this multi-dimensional reality that we share. There was no vocabulary. There were no terms. The thoughts that we have come to take for granted, such things as karma, reincarnation, were utterly foreign to the Western world. They didn't exist. Now, I will go into the grocery store in the little suburb of Chicago where the Theosophical Society is. And there'll be someone ahead of you in line, just talking about karma or talking about dreams. Or it has become something that is in every dictionary, in every country of the world. The conceptual language in order to discuss and to attempt to understand these profound ideas is now a global inheritance that is the direct result of the Theosophical Society and its work. That's one of those things that is, as time is going by, one of the things that I find myself having to respond to pretty much weekly is some researcher in the academic community who is very much aware of the Theosophical Society's influence across a range of things. I mean, just last night we were just talking about the influence of the Theosophical Society on contemporary art. Not too very long ago, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, actually about 2 years ago, I was looking for, we had a request for the pictures from the book Thought Forms. Probably most, if not all of you, were familiar with the book. Very, very seminal sorts of drawings, pictures. But anyway, somebody wanted them for a biennial exhibition that was being done in Istanbul, Turkey. And so I looked for them. Figured the natural place would be in the archives at Adyar. Not there. We looked up, we looked down, we looked everywhere. I remembered that perhaps they had been lent out for an exhibition that took place in 1987 in Los Angeles, New York, and London. So we found ourselves looking in New York, looking in Los Angeles, looking in London. No results. And we put people to work trying to just find where these paintings were, until we just gave up. So, 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, Lily and I were in Varanasi, formerly Benares, for, I was conducting a workshop there at the Indian Section's national headquarters. And during the workshop, there was a woman who was there from Australia, who was actually an artist. And she came up and just started talking to me. She said, well, we were talking about different things. She said, well, those thought form paintings, they're in the library. I said, what library? Yeah, the library. Right around the corner. I said, you've got to be kidding. And went there, and sure enough, just half of them hanging crooked. The bugs had gotten into them and eaten some of them. But sure enough, here were 21 of the original 40-some paintings from that book. And, I said, please, let me see them. So they brought them, and that's what they were. So immediately, we put them in conservation level framing, and stopped the bugs from eating, stopped making it into bug food. But these are, when you see them in the book, they are impressive. They're about this big. But when you see them up close, it's something that has a power. But these are paintings that are widely recognized as having had a profound influence on such artists as Kandinsky, Mondrian, just this whole movement right up to the contemporary movement. And so there are museums in Italy, in Australia, in England, who are now wanting to mount an exhibition of these. So this is just one example of the heritage that has fallen to the world we live in today as a result of this Theosophical movement. And then it's music, it's philosophy, it's architecture, it's everything. So for us, we end up having to ask the question, what is our work in this time? It's good to look back at others. It can be instructive. What is it that we can bring? We have the beauty and the benefit of things that others in HPB's time did not have, which is to say, a really fully developed expression of this theosophical teaching. In her time, Synod, every week Synod was having to develop language to try and express it. And so these things were not available. We're 2-3 generations down the line now. So, in terms of the availability of the knowledge, of the information, we have that. But I would say this, I can't say it's fortunate or unfortunate. I would just say it is a fact. We have a vast information, we have a significant knowledge, but if you look around you at the condition of the world, it becomes very clear that knowledge and information are not enough. It's not going to do it. We are not going to know our way. We are not going to inform our way to peace. We're not going to inform our way to freedom. We are not going to become sufficiently informed, sufficiently knowledgeable to feel an absence of this ever-spreading sort of fear that seems to be the global condition at the moment. People are actually making money and making careers out of peddling fear. And people are buying. So, that's not going to do it. So obviously, information and knowledge of a certain type has its value, definitely. They say knowledge is power. It has a certain power. But the thing that I think falls to us, and we have to find various ways of making this entree into the world, is that these principles, this knowledge has to somehow come to life. It's not living until it takes root inside of us. Inside of us. So, what is it that makes that possible? What is the alchemical agent? What is the esoteric secret that activates this presence of wisdom within us? And as with most secrets, as with everything that is described as esoteric, these things that are hidden, the best place to hide it is right in front of your eyes. They say if you want to hide something from an ignorant thief, put it in a book. Last place to look. But, what is it that is so hidden from us that we fail to recognize this agent that will catalyze these things into life? And quite honestly, I am not of the belief that this is something that is deeply esoteric. In fact, it's become something of a buzzword in the world today. We have an opportunity to interact with this every time we come together in our groups, whenever we find ourselves in the presence of another person. This alchemical agent, possibly at least its initial phases, it's something that we become aware of as this quality that is described as kindness. To be kind. Anytime anyone finds themselves in the presence of someone who exhibits this quality, there's a certain response, an energetic response that takes place. We feel something loosening. We feel what often becomes described as an openness. We feel safe. There's a certain sense of a pervading, shared security that allows us to experience something deeper. And through those experiences, we grow. We've developed these touchstones of awakening. The thing that we're trying to do is described as human transformation or human regeneration. The transformation, we are changing the form of the human expression, going across to another way of expressing. And so I think, simple thing, there is another alchemical agent of a similar sort, which has been described as gratitude. Just simple thankfulness for the exceedingly rare opportunity that we have been given in this life. An opportunity to interact with genuine teachings, with genuine people who can express these things, that can actually lead us to these deeper states of awareness, that impact the world around us. So these are just ideas. But I do believe that the most important work before us is, first of all, this work of this inner application of these principles, so that they're not just ideas any longer. So that it becomes something that is actually exemplified in, they say, I didn't have an opportunity to meet him, but they say the past president of the TS, Sri Ram, was a really profound and peaceful man. And so what they say is that very often when problems would arise at Adyar, people would come to talk to him. And I don't know, I guess things were different in that time. Back in that time, there were problems that arose. So they would come to talk to him. And they said they would sit down with him and they start talking about all the things that are going on and how, what this person's doing and all the different things. And the talk would end and they would walk away. And I've heard numerous people say this, that as they left, I said, wow, really, Sri Ram really helped me work that out. It was so good to talk with him. And the things that he said. And then I started thinking. And then they realized that in the time that they had been with me, he hadn't said anything. He listened. He listened with a heart that heard. He gave to them that very special gift of attention, that in this moment, you're the the Dalai Lama, who is always, he is always beset with people wanting his attention. But the way it is with him, I'm just the person in front of him at the moment. But when he is with you, there is nobody else in the world at that moment. You're not doing anything special. Your little role in the world, you're not Barack Obama. You're not a world leader. But when he's there with you, any person who's ever been with him just has this impression, which is true, that at that moment, you are the most special thing in this world and the sole object of my attention. And that's not something that is just, you don't have to be a rebirth of a high lama for that to be the case. And so anyway, I'm just suggesting things. Out of this, clearly works can be defined. But as we move forward, the expression of the concepts has great value. The ideas have a certain power. But that, coupled with an active awareness and understanding that we have cultivated through our own efforts, is something that will have this impact that spreads. And when it happens together, moments like this, oftentimes I find myself saying this. We come together in groups, and when we come together, oftentimes we come just to hear what this person is saying. Or we come because we think there's another piece of information we'll get, or something that's related to our need. But somehow or another, when we find ourselves in each other's presence, and when, for whatever reason, the energies that we all share find themselves being structured in a certain way, there are moments that do occur. And when those moments do occur, it's something that we are aware of. We're aware of it by a certain stillness. We're aware of it by a sense of enlargement that somehow we feel together. And during those moments are the very moments when we really do become usable. It's not projecting our will upon the world as we're so accustomed to do. It's allowing, and mostly unconsciously. We really tend to become aware of it after the fact. We look back and we say, wow, that was a good talk. That's as far as we get with it. But these are the moments. Because in this moment, in every moment, we are within a world that is in deep need. We are among individuals who have profound needs. There are people in every moment being born into this world for a purpose. There are people in every moment who are exiting this world. We don't know where it happens. We don't know when it happens. But that which radiates from these moments touches each one, marks each one. And it's a special gift we can give. We don't know how it works. We don't know how it will show itself. But we do know that we're capable of doing it. Probably a lot more I could say, but we are all creatures of time. And by this clock that is placed right in front of me, my time is over. But anyway, as all